Hi, and welcome to the Vintage Computer Federation YouTube channel. Your support helps us with creating videos just like this one and restoring vintage computers for all the world to enjoy. So please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. If you're watching us online, thank you for watching. So, I guess this is going to be an interesting thing. We're going to basically, I'm going to ask Bobby some questions, and Bobby's going to ask me some questions. So bear with us. We intentionally did not rehearse, unlike when we don't actually rehearse on, okay, unscripted TV shows have a 2-minute rehearsal before we actually shoot. The 2-minute rehearsal of, what are we going to talk about now? So we're not going to do that. We have a little cheat sheet. So, and I guess we should also introduce ourselves too for some people who don't know who we are. And then we'll talk a little bit about RR auction, and we'll talk about the auctioning and authentication and some of the exciting things that RR has done over the years. And we'll talk a little bit about the current auction going on right now and the artifact that you see on display. And then we'll mention, I guess we'll plug the TV show, right? So we'll do a little bit of that, and we'll talk to you guys about some of the current projects, and maybe give you some more stories.
Excuse me, I'm Bobby Livingston.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get there, man.
Hold on, but we're gonna plug. We have a current auction that's happening. We've got dozens and dozens of vintage lots. So you didn't mention that.
I did say that you'll talk about the current auction and the table. So
all right, fine.
Yeah, you'll see we have got a bit of a banter going. We've known each other for a while. So I'm Cohen. You probably see me at the front desk at a lot of these vintage computer festivals because I sit on the board of the Vintage Computer Federation. But I'm also, I guess they call me the Apple I expert. So, I'm usually consulted about most of the Apple ones that are for sale, or if owners want to, turn them on or get them working or restore them back to original condition. As I usually say, it's not vintage dust that's on those things. The dust is not what it was. Vintage is what it was back in the day. Basically, I'm going to let Bobby introduce himself. So you did quickly, but give us a bit more, and then tell us about RR Auction.
My name is Bobby Livingston. I'm Executive Vice President at RR Auction in Boston. The company started in 1976. I've been there since 2008. The company started out as an auction company that specialized in manuscripts and documents, autographs. We were experts in authentication in-house, and we had a great reputation for selling autographs. And we've had a monthly catalog that we print. We've never missed a month since 1980. so it keeps us
paper catalogs.
Yeah, we still send them out.
Awesome. I look forward every time I get one in the mail to see what's up.
Right. We do these now. We're doing them twice a month, which is kind of crazy. But people still love to have the tactile experience of a catalog as opposed to just being online. Although a lot of people do online.
I'll tell you, people do collect them too. So, I've got my own collection of them. It's kind of neat because you can go back and look something up.
No, we don't autograph them.
Well, there's autograph printings of stuff in it, right? But yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question before we get into how you got into the, Apple and vintage computers and all that. I'm going to ask you kind of the question you probably get asked the most, which is, what's the most expensive item or artifact you've ever sold? And can you elaborate a little bit on who might have bought it?
Sure. I guess about 2 or 3 years ago, we were approached by the Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' own Blue Origin rocket company, and they didn't know what they were going to sell a rocket seat for, so they wanted to hold an auction. And so part of it, I don't know, I'm sure you guys remember, you got to fly with Jeff Bezos, you got to spend 4 days with him training, and you got to be on the first flight. And so they approached us to do this auction, and one of the things they wanted us to do was to vet every customer that signed up. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people signed up. But there was a certain threshold of you had to have a certain net worth. In order to it was going to be $250,000 or more. So we ended up vetting. So the auction kind of started before the day of the auction, like online, and so it stopped at 4.9 million was the opening bid on the day of the sale, and we had 23 people that we vetted that were willing to bid 5 million the next bid. So you can imagine the type of people that we had on our phones. But what I want to tell you, which is kind of was a problem, we weren't expecting 23 people to want to be on the phone, so we had to wrangle up a bunch of people to be phone bidders for RR, and I needed one more, and I went to I go to a sushi bar, and I grabbed the bartender from the sushi bar, and I dragged him down to Boston to do this live sale, and I gave him the one person that I figured was never going to bid but once, because he's a bartender, not an auction taker. So I gave him that phone, and so anyway, the auctioneer goes, 5 million, can I get 5 million? Yes, 5 million, 6 million. All of a sudden, the bartender goes, 7 million. Oh no! I'm like, oh no! So I run over there. What's going on? And then 8 million, 9 million. All of a sudden, you can hear him go, 10 million. And this guy, he has no hair, and his head is turning red out of fear. I mean, he is flipping out. And it's still on YouTube. You can watch it. Anyway, it got to 15 million, 16 million, 17 million, 18 million, 19 million, 20 million, 22 million, 24 million, and then it stops, and we wait, and finally 26 million.
This is like in the movies.
Right, and then bang, 28 million, and that just it blew away Blue Origin, and they didn't expect it to go that high. So it was quite a celebratory thing, and now now the tickets sell, and they know what to sell them for, which is millions. So anyway, the guy that won it, we kept him confidential until he announced this, and he was a cryptocurrency guy. So he paid $28 million that day. So that's the highest price thing we've ever sold.
So apparently every few minutes I got to get up and move my mouse around, but that's okay. So yeah, that's amazing. So I got to ask, how'd you really get into vintage computers? I'm sure it's kind of an interesting story for the auction house, which is known for autographs and I guess space seats.
Well, it has to do with the space program, the Apollo program. As you know, invented they had to build a computer to fit into the lunar module and command module, right? So we do a lot of NASA artifacts, and we sell many things for the Apollo astronauts. Some of them no longer with us, but Apollo Commander Dave Scott worked on the Diski and worked on the Apollo guidance computer at MIT. So what happened, just real quick, because we were specialists in manuscripts and autographs, we sold a lot of space autographs over a certain period of time, and we had a client that wanted to consign his collection, and we said, sure, but he said, you have to sell my space artifacts. And we didn't know anything about space artifacts, so we said yes, and we had a very successful sale. When one of the main things we had, which I think is fascinating, is when Wally Schirra splashed down on a Mercury program, the guys in mission control said, hey, we hid something behind a panel, and he opened up the panel, and there was a little bottle of whiskey and a pack of cigarettes, Lucky Strikes. They had put 4 Lucky Strikes in there, and so he drank the whiskey and saved the pack of smokes, which we ended up selling for about $12,000. So from these successful sales, then the astronauts themselves began consigning to us, and we had we sold an Apollo guidance computer, which we had here a couple of years ago. But from that, we started to pick up a lot of people that love technology. So that's kind of how we got into computers. And I don't know, out there we have the Steve Jobs job application from 1973, where it's a pretty amazing document. But it was sold at one of the big New York auction houses, and the person, I think, paid like $14,000 for it. You remember when so they didn't even...
I do remember that.
So they knew that we were a document specialist, so they didn't even take it out of the box, I don't think, and they sent it right to us within a month or two, and we sold it for $174,000. So
I think that beats Bitcoin a few years ago. So
it's one of those great things. And then when you get high prices like that and you get media, then suddenly people start calling you, hey, I got this and I got that, and
They come out of the woodwork, really, is what it is, right?
Right.
So I know you're always running around all over the place, just looking at things and checking them out, because people call and say, I've got this. And you really got to see, do they really have this?
Right. And one day we got a call from a guy in Northern California, a college professor, says, I've got an Apple One. And I said, you have an Apple One? What's an Apple One? You know, I didn't know what an Apple One was. But I said, I'll be right there. And so I flew up there, and he had it, and he told me, where he got it and all that. But I didn't know what to do with it, so I had to find him. I had to track him down.
Luckily, I show up pretty high in Google when you're looking for an Apple One expert. So, I think, and then you guys contacted me. It was kind of cool. And, it's always exciting to find a new one, or, one that was known, but it hasn't really been circulated in a while. So it's kind of fun. It's nice to hear stories and meet the owners. So, and I think that really kind of turned you guys into that sale, into kind of the go-to place right now for vintage tech, right? So whether it's an Apollo guidance computer, or a piece of the space program. I think you sold a space shuttle tire once.
Oh yeah, we sold a space shuttle tire. Of course, when the space shuttle lands, it skids the tires, but they have to, they take them off. What do they do with them? Well, they deaccession them, and somebody buys them in a government surplus sale. But we sell those for tens of thousands of dollars. These big old tires. So I just do want to say one thing. So. A lot of us, tech guys are also musicians. So if you really want to get like a Jimi Hendrix owned guitar or something like that, these guys probably also wind up with it. So they don't just do the vintage tech. It's a minor plug here, but when I went up to your offices the first time, because being a music guy, my jaw just fell out of my hit the floor, right? Just seeing all the really, really cool stuff that you guys have that comes up for auction. And that you pace them out because you have themes for your auctions, right? So that's also kind of cool. So when you get these catalogs, and they're nice because they're also by category. So if you're really interested in music or autographs or, stuff like that, you kind of collect them. It's kind of neat. So I know you did something with an Apple II manual that was kind of interesting. So so what I think we had was it the pizza box Apple One that actually came with an original box.
So let me actually talk about that for just a second. So the Apple One never actually came in a case. It was literally just a board. Now, that being said, the Byte Shop sold, the preferred case from the famous story of, well, this gives you an opportunity to sell cases and keyboards. So yes, there's a case and a keyboard that if you purchased your Apple One from the Byte Shop at the same time they put it in, you never received what we call the pizza box. It's really like a mailer box. And there really are few surviving of these mailer boxes. And it was kind of neat to have a mailer box that was signed by Woz. It was kind of authenticated. You could see the address. All this stuff was on it because it was so rare to find this just box with the Apple One, because depending on how you bought it, you may have just chucked the box, right? You put it in a case, why do we need the box?
It was an ugly box. I mean, it's not like
it's an ugly box.
There's no logo on it.
It's a white magazine mailer from the 1970s.
Wait, why would you keep that? I don't know.
Most people wouldn't.
I know, so it's awesome.
So it's kind of cool it survived, but when I see something like that, I get excited because, it's all about what we call provenance, it's all about originality, it's all about the things that came with it, right? It's the same reason why you can have, and obviously condition, but it's the same reason why you can have like a vintage, Corvette with numbers matching go for like, $500,000 and a vintage Corvette that has a replacement engine go for, $50,000. It's always having these complete things and always being as original as can be. And then obviously if it's, was driven by an astronaut, it's worth a lot more.
Well, I think what makes Apple Ones, because we've sold 4 of them. We've got one out, the big one we're going to sell now, but we've sold 4 of them, and each one of them has its own story. You know what I mean? I think every one on the registry almost, tells some computer history story or development. I mean, every one of them is kind of cool, and the pizza box one is remarkable.
Yeah, and what's cool for you is that a lot of these that these Apple Ones that you've gotten. So I always get asked, why are there so many, like a high percentage of these things that survived? And a lot of it is not that they survived because anyone thought they'd be worth something. Apple was trying to get them out of people's hands because it took too much time for Woz to support working on them. So they gave some really good trade-in deals that got better and better over time. And those boards basically wound up in piles in Jobs' office. And he didn't throw them away. He didn't bandsaw them, as people used to say, because they were fiberglass. You wouldn't crack them so easily. But he kind of let employees grab for, souvenirs and mementos. And a lot of these guys did. So there's like 25 or 30 boards that were sitting in a pile that these former Apple employees grabbed. And that's why there's so many surviving. It's not that, people thought they would be worth anything. Now, granted, by like 1981, it became a collectible. And, there's some famous stories about, Sierra Online founder having his Apple I and being very proud of it in like 1981 or 82, talking to Woz. But, these things are really collectible. And, the owners turn them on. They sometimes hang them on the wall. It's bragging rights. It's also cool if you're into tech. So that's why there's so much interest in these. And the particular one out there, I don't know.
Well, hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. So the point is that we started selling all these Apple Ones. We started getting really high prices. And then I got a call that someone had a broken one. And I ran and got it. I put it in a case, and I want you to play this video. I want you to play this.
Let's give the first background. I get a phone call from you, coming like in the evening, and you're like, I have to come show you something. I'm in the area, I got to show you this Apple One. It needs some repair. I need you to take a look at it. That's literally how this started. And, I always get it needs some repair, or it needs restoration, or we need to do something. And we need to authenticate it, obviously, because, there are replicas out there, and people, whether intentionally or not intentionally, because someone said they had a real one and they died and their heirs think it's real, you obviously have to validate that it's real. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But, so kind of ad hoc, Bobby comes in with the case into my kitchen and hands my wife his cell phone and said, "You need to record this. I just want to see his reaction." And I'm thinking it's no big deal. He just wants to, And I think the video speaks for itself. So let's switch over here.
This is, but you can tell me what it is.
It's not a computer.
Let's see.
Okay, let's see what it is.
Beat to hell. It is beat to hell.
Oh yeah, ignore the language if your ears are sensitive. Oh shit.
What do you mean, oh shit?
This is one of the prototypes. That's in pieces.
Well, it's got the logo on it.
Before they even had a logo.
Right.
Holy shit. It is beat to hell, and you're going to get a bloody fortune for this one.
Is that not amazing? So tell us exactly what this is.
So this is, when you first have a board made, you get a prototype run done. And this would have been the prototype run of the original Apple I. So this was like before they went and did a run. Let's see if these are hand soldered. Yeah, this is Woz. This is Woz's solder.
That's one of Woz's first boards, right?
Yeah. No. Well, look at the lines. These.
Yeah.
This is because they've had mistakes.
Right.
So they ran the board. They had mistakes, and then he fixed the mistakes, fixed the mask, and had the board run done with the fixes.
Right.
Because they never come out the first one. So he did some rewires here, and this is Woz. The reason why it's Woz is how tight these are.
Yeah.
And he did it because what he does is he soldered with three hands. He used this hand. He used to put the solder in his teeth and do this so he could hold stuff. That's how he made them tight. So the soldering iron, hold it, and yeah. So this is the freaking prototype.
How historic is that?
This is beyond historic.
Now,
This is-
what happened here? Was it the capacitors or what was up here that's broken up?
Yeah, or it got stepped on. It just literally was cracked. I don't see fire damage. It probably was just stepped on and destroyed over time. Something heavy was put on it because the capacitors are here.
Yeah.
So they stick out. So if something heavy was put on it and they pushed pressure on it and it cracked. Simple as that. Wasn't an intentional crack, it just cracked.
It's not smashed.
Yeah. It's because the power supply sits high up. If you would have put something heavy on this, it would have been odd weight, cracked, and the other half was probably thrown out.
Now, what about these chips? Are these the proper chips that would have been in the first one, the prototype? Are those
Well,
the right
it's the standard ones. So you just would have used whatever you had around. Yeah, you would have used whatever you had around. So, yeah.
ones? Pretty awesome.
But no, this is hand soldered. There's telltale signs this was hand soldered, and it was definitely hand soldered by Walls. Just because he's the only guy who did this tight.
Yeah. So it's one of the first ones.
It's one of the first ones. He did say he did a couple. It might be the only one not in his possession. There you go. It might be one of the only ones not in his possession. Simple as that. So I guess I'm not restoring this one. No. But yeah, I'll write something up for it. We'll do a condition report. Because what you want to do is you want a condition report to show the style, and you want to show that I can show that it was hand soldered. And the other interesting part here is this was, so he populated this section here.
Yeah.
Even though he wasn't using it because it probably wasn't set up for, I don't think it was set up for 6501, it was set up for 6502, but he populated this section probably to test that the clock was proper. And this circuit worked because they were shipping it where it could be 6502 or 65. Before they thought they could sell them, sell them complete. This was definitely he was selling partials. Yeah, this is a find. This is a find. And we can do a real proper video when you want.
Right.
Okay.
I wanted to get his
Yeah.
expression.
Yeah.
Alright.
So hold on. So it's a couple of things out of that. So I get asked now. I've been asked a few times, and obviously some of you may have seen the Mercury News article, right? But I get how do I know it was Waz's soldering, right? And how did I know? It's pretty much it's a prototype. Besides the materials, right? You guys are technical. You understand that that's essentially made out of cardboard and wood chip with resin. You would never give that board to someone or sell that board to someone if it was not in a case, right? We've seen those for old TVs. They use those boards because no one's supposed to service things, right? Same thing with the power supplies in the Apple II. They're cheap. They're dirt cheap. But when you make a board you're going to sell, you make a green-coated board, number one, because there's less chance of mistakes because they put the coating in between, right, the solder mask, in between the connections so you don't accidentally short them out. And you do it also in fiberglass because you don't want the boards breaking. So that's one hint, right? The other one is the fact that the board, I wound up photo matching it because I guess an hour or two later I realized I had copies, of photographs of this board running. So, and we tracked those down. There are a bunch of Polaroids that were taken by Paul Terrell. And someone actually contacted me yesterday that he's another one of those those Polaroids. So it's kind of cool. And, knowing that it doesn't have the green coat, you can't put it in a wave solder machine. Now, Woz is famous. There's tons of video of him saying when Jobs sold the Apple I to the Byte Shop, they had 30 days to go get 50 made. Well, guess what? You can't hand solder 50 of these two guys in a garage. They found out for about $12, they could pay someone to wave solder them. You can't wave solder this board. It would be completely shorted out. The wave soldering, you get some shorts once in a while, but they're easy to find, easy to track down. The other known prototypes are the wire wrap, which Woz owns himself. That's not even really a prototype of the Apple I. That was his computer he built for himself. And the company was started because Woz would spend weeks troubleshooting the thousands of individual wires, or if something came loose when he had a problem. So Jobs said, why don't we get a board made up, and for 20 bucks we'll sell them. And of course, he turned around and sold 50 complete computers to Paul Terrell at the Byte Shop and had 30 days to deliver them. So Woz wasn't that happy. But that's one reason why we know it was hand soldered. Now, how do we know it was hand soldered by Woz? Well, that's actually an interesting thing. So hopefully this appears. Just want to point it out because Woz can't remember if he hand soldered this one. Because in the article yesterday, Woz says, I don't think I hand soldered. And then in the end, he goes, I'm not sure. Well, this is his prototype. It's hand soldered, original DIS2 controller. You'll notice the shape of the solder joints. Yes, we do this under a microscope. This is what historians do. This is what authentication is. Lots of microscope measurements. And you look at the actual board itself, where you had these corrections. They match. Why do they match? Because when you solder, you do this. When you solder with your mouth, you do this. And you get a totally different shape. When you wave solder, gravity pinches the solder into a reverse mountain, like a little kind of triangle. So there's ways to tell who soldered it. It's evidence. People's memory do get faulty after 50 years. Hell, I can't remember what I ate for dinner 2 days ago. But the evidence shows it. And to be honest, this might be the only Apple I that's out of his possession that he ever soldered himself. Because as he has said, he wasn't in the garage very often. It was Jobs, it was Patty Jobs, Steve Jobs, Patty Jobs shoving chips in. When Kotke came back from college in his summer break, he helped out. But basically, this is the only one that probably was soldered by him outside of Woz's own collection. Because the rest of them, other than the single prototype that is owned by a collector in Southern California that was sold for quite a bit of money, which was a green coat board, because it was the first run, and then they had to figure out why they had problems with that one. Other than that one, this is it. And this one is is before they started the actual green coat run. And it's probably the first product or kind of, we'll say, professionally created product to come out of Apple, because they went to Howard Canton and had him lay this thing out, versus Woz hand wiring something before the company was started. So I think that's pretty much all I'm going to say on that, because otherwise we're not going to be able to talk about other cool stuff like what else is in this auction. And I think there's a lot of really cool stuff. So Bobby, if you want to come back up here, let's. And by the way, when I create these things, there are condition reports. They are many, many pages long. Photo matching, pieces, and they can go on for 40, 50, 60 pages. So it's a lot of work, and it's important that we, when people spend this kind of money, they want to be sure what they're getting, right? So, talk to us a little bit about, I know you've been selling a bunch of really cool Atari stuff and things like that from early computing as well, from early home computing. So how'd you get, and what are the things you've sold, and how'd you get some of these, and, really then talk to us a little bit about the current auction you have, where you can see the stuff out there, which I'll tell you, remember I mentioned they had 30 days? They have the check to pay for the parts.
That's right. We had that check that actually paid for the parts, and I think, and maybe you guys know this is true or not, but it was any check over a certain amount they both had to sign. Because we've had a couple other checks that are signed by just Steve Jobs, but this one was signed by Wozniak and Jobs, and it was to the electronics company for the parts to build the Apple I. So that went for, I think, over $150,000, John? It was a pretty incredible check.
And by the way, Jobs didn't sign many things. So having his signature on something is rare.
Right.
So
Right. One of the things that we do, like we hire Corey to authenticate the computers, make sure they run, et cetera. We always send any Steve Jobs autograph to somebody else to authenticate so that we're not biased, because Jobs' signature is so simple that people try to forge it or have forged it, or the authentication companies are extremely conservative. They won't just sign off on them, even though the provenance, like it comes from people like you know, that worked with Jobs, were around Jobs, you know, and they'll turn them down. Like, so it's very difficult to get ones that are authenticated. So
the other cool thing, though, it's actually Steve Wozniak's actual signature. I don't think people realize his signature of Woz is a contrived signature. You'll find that with a lot of people who are asked to sign their signature over and over again, like a lot of Hollywood stars and stuff, or musicians. They have a signature they sign for legal documents, and they have the public signature. So that's kind of the cool thing. It also makes it hard sometimes to validate. But, you know, when you have known examples, that's why you have an expert.
Right. So the scarcity of Jobs has driven up the prices. We had an Apple II manual when Jobs went to England for the first time to launch the Apple II because they had no European distributor. There was a young kid upstairs named Julian who had an Apple II manual and went downstairs and asked Jobs to sign it. And so he signed it, Julian, go change the world, Steve Jobs. And so when we got that manual, it was a spectacular example. We had never seen anything like it, and the public hadn't seen anything like it. We put it up for auction, and maybe $10,000, we figured. It went for $700,000. And the winning bidder has outed himself. He was Jim Irsay of the Indianapolis Colts. Outbid another collector for it. And I just saw, it was just in New York. He's got a touring exhibition, so if you see Irsay around his exhibition, you can see that particular thing. And then the other amazing thing about Jobs and his signature, you used to write to people and ask for the autograph, and they would send things back. And on one day, for whatever reason, Steve Jobs answered an autograph. The guy wrote, "Can I have your autograph?" And Steve Jobs typed up a letter and said, "I don't sign autographs, Steve Jobs," and mailed it back to the guy. Now, this guy that had this, he was not a wealthy person. He was like a retired, you know, I don't even think he was a postman, but he had a minor job, but he had this box of things he had written out. He sent it to us, and I think we sold that one for like $300,000. And so when Jobs says go change the world, well, he did change the world for this guy, right? So it was a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah. So we should mention it's kind of, everyone goes, well, who buys this stuff? You just heard it wasn't a technology person. It's someone who actually just respected the idea of things like, you know, the future and that have been created, or their lives have been, you know, changed by Steve Jobs. You know, I'm probably going to out a couple of people here as collectors, but, you know, the guy who started Glam Glow Cosmetics, a guy named Glenn Delamore, who's done, I'm not really outing him, he's done magazine stuff. He collects vintage computers, right? He's a cosmetics guy. The current governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, he is an Apple I owner. He actually owns the Apple I that was used in an automobile shop. There's a famous story about it, right? He owns that one. The one that was used in an automobile shop, because it was cheaper to buy an Apple I and hardwire it to write "next up" or "your car is ready" than it was to actually buy a system made for it. But he owns that one. So there are people not in our industry who have these computers or have these artifacts, and it's because they either were inspired, or it's something that they felt, you know, really gave them a connection to what was happening at Apple or in that time period.
In the same vein, we had a guy that I forget his name off the top of my head, but he had helped make the blue boxes, and he was Woz's friend, and Woz drew out the schematics for the Apple II, pages and pages of them, and this guy retained them. And so he brought them to us, and this is before we had sold the thing for $700,000, and he brought them to us, and we figured out maybe $800 to $1,000. We didn't know what they were worth. He didn't know what they were worth. So
There's
again,
no what we call comps for these things.
So again, not a computer person, but a person that understood the importance of history and schematics. They ended up selling for about $700,000, and we had them estimated, at less than if someone had called us up and offered us $5,000, the consignor would have probably taken it. But it ended up going up for about $700,000, the original schematics, and it's in a very, very important manuscript collection. So you never know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to buy these things.
Very much, yeah. It's kind of amazing. So is there anything else in this upcoming auction that, you can see the catalog here. These guys are giving out catalogs. Is there anything else that's kind of interesting? Any good stories besides the Apple One we just talked about?
Well, earlier this year, we represented Al Alcorn, and he had the Atari prototypes that we sold for, a couple $100,000, and all the early Pong and things. But there was a couple things he had left, which I thought was fascinating. So I came back out to visit him, and he had the oscilloscope that he used to make Pong with. But he goes, "Oh, I lent this to Wozniak to make the Apple II." So, I mean,
He very casually said that.
I know. It's like, give it. And my colleague John says, "Get him to sign it." So he did. So we've got that in the auction. I don't think it's going to sell for much, but it's one of those things, just historic,
And a lot of the owners, they back things up with documentation. It's very important. There are affidavits, documentation, photo evidence. A lot of times you get things where the owners don't want to be, or the consigners is, I guess, the term we use, don't want to be known. So sometimes we might know more information about an artifact that we can't share. We can just hint about it a little bit, but we really have to, be careful. Because we do respect people's privacy when they sell it. They don't want for many reasons. Think about all the people who win the lotto, right? The guy who thought he was going to get a couple $1,000s, maybe $2,000, $3,000 for a bunch of schematic diagrams from Woz. I was blown away by them. By the way, it was how he came up with the color chip, stuff. And he gets $700,000. If he wasn't super anonymous, I think he'd have some relatives coming out of the woodwork. So,
but on the other hand, when we come to the Vintage Computer Fair, we meet these witnesses to history, these pioneers, the people that worked on these projects, or Lee Felsenstein. We have a penny whistle modem over there. That's not worth a ton of money, right? But it's in its original box, never opened, never used, never modified, and it comes from the guy.
It came from Lee, right? It's Lee. It's Lee's penny whistle.
It's important to out the consignor at that point, because it brings value, because it's obvious. It's the inventor of it. It's his. And so something that maybe was worth $1,000 or $2,000 is worth tens of thousands of dollars, maybe. That's what,
right. And
we don't know what's going to happen.
Everyone knows the history of Lee, right? So without him, a lot of our industry wouldn't exist, because Lee and his stick, right, in the homebrew computer club. So kind of cool. I think, we could probably go on about tons of different stories, but it's one of the other things that's kind of cool that I've had the opportunity with Bobby to do is a lot of TV stuff, like filming things for news and filming things for different things. And recently we did a show for Fox Nation. You did a bunch of episodes, but we did one together. And it's kind of cool because let's step away from the technology like the Apple One. I was blown away by the golf clubs from Ronald Reagan's golf putter. Right? That was kind of, one of those things. You don't expect it to go for so much. I know that the original owner's like, I'm going to pay my daughter's college with this.
I thought he was crazy.
And you're like, you're crazy. And in the end, he paid his daughter's college with it.
It was a cheap golf club. And you guys, it's on Fox Nation. You can watch it, but it wasn't an expensive golf club. It's just a golf club that Reagan used on Air Force One.
With photographs of it.
But the guy says, I want my daughter to go to MIT. I want this to pay for tuition. I'm like, dude, I don't think this is going to pay for community college. What, are you crazy? But it ended up going for a lot of money. But Corey and I, if you seek it out, we also did a episode of Pawn Stars.
Done a couple of episodes, right. I think, yeah.
On an Apple One that ended up selling. they made an offer, or we asked him for a price, he turned us down, then we put it in the auction, and it sold for more than what he
Yeah, and
offered.
actually, I had the fun of last year, actually this week, the VCF week, I went to the owner's house, and I spent about 4 or 5 hours, the guy who bought it, showing him how to use it. So, he wanted to be able to turn on his Apple One at least once a month or once every couple of months, make sure it still works, and he also wanted to be able to play around with it and show it off to his friends. I said, why don't you get a replica for that? He goes, no, it's so much cooler to do it on the real thing. I said, cool. So, yeah, I came down, and it was nice. So, it's kind of fun to see where they wind up. Now, yes, we've seen some that have sold that wind up on, people's walls, and we've seen some that people want to turn on and run. So it's kind of neat. There was also, I love this. I love this show because usually when we do stuff together, it's all very computer focused, right? Apple ones or something like that. But this one, it's kind of ran the gambit, this show on Fox Nation. And so it was nice to see other things and to see, other experts talking about stuff. So it was fun.
Oh, good.
And so I was excited. My wife was excited to see it too. But yeah, you're on all the time. You're on, I see we've done a few Apple One stuff on, the news and other things. So, it's kind of fun.
It's kind of a secret sauce to our auction success is to sell something for a lot of money. People see it in the newspaper, then they call you up, and they've got something like that, and it sells for more. And it just, because the biggest thing and our biggest issue is getting consignments, getting things to sell. And so we have to get out into the media because what we sell is cool. So what we sell is historic, and so people want to learn about these things. So we do a lot of press efforts.
And the fun part is, I think you trump yourself each time, right? So it's kind of neat. Like, hey, I've got this one. That is so cool. Then the next one, I'm like, even more. And then you saw my reaction, right, on the video for this one. I don't know what you're going to do to beat that. And
Well, if anybody out here has an Apple One that's more important than the prototype, if there is one, if there's someone in this room that wants to consign to our auction, I've got my card here, and come on up. Or if you've got any other cool early computer vintage memorabilia that you think is extremely valuable, come see us.
One other thing we should mention is, we are in Silicon Valley and there is NASA Ames, right? So if you also have any space stuff.
Right, right. We specialize in lots of different things. So come by the booth and we'll show you the other kinds of things we sell. And so thank you, Corey.
Yep. And I think we are coming close to our time, but I did want to see if anyone had any questions. I'm going to come down because, we want you on the recording for YouTube. So if anyone has any questions, speak your piece.
So I understand that people who buy art or buy art at auctions know when they take them home that they have to put them in a certain temperature-controlled area. What about people who buy old computer parts? Do they know how to keep them?
Usually that's a common question I get asked by museums. So I've actually designed exhibits at a few museums around the world, and I usually get asked, what's the humidity, what's the temperature, what's the light, Now, luckily for the Apple One, because it's on a fiberglass board, right? Other than the fact that it's static sensitive, there is, you say treat it like a fine bottle of wine, so so you give them essentially, what the humidity and what the temperature should be. But you'll notice that the board that they're showing off here, the prototype board, is encased in a glass and metal case. That is for multiple reasons. Number one, for humidity control and other things like that. Number two is to protect it because it is brittle, right? It is not intended to be an artifact that, it was never intended to be in the public's hands, right? So it's pretty fragile. So, that gets special care, right? But yeah, I do get asked all the time, like, how do you store these things? And I can tell you one of the toughest things is, like, I have a ventless Apple II, right? Made with that foam garbage that basically falls apart in itself. And I've had tons of people beg me to bring that thing to VCF. And I won't bring it to VCF. I won't even, like VCF East, I live on the East Coast. Hey, Corey, can you bring that thing into VCF, into VCF East? I'm like, it doesn't come out of the special case ever, because it will literally crumble because of the materials it was made out of, because it's not, stable material. So yeah, there's a lot of considerations people take. Okay, anyone else have a question? Coming on down.
Hey, Bobby. So I know since I sold last year with you that you require that we ship the product to you, even though it's an internet auction. But so do you have like an exhibit hall where people can come in, brick and mortar exhibit where people can come in and actually see the artifact, or is it all online?
It's mostly online, but if someone is an interested party, they can come to our offices and inspect it. Many people do want to inspect things before they purchase it. Sometimes we do have public viewings. If we have a big enough auction, we do invite the public to see a selection of the items. But yeah, it's mostly online, but that's why we take a ton of photographs. I don't know if you've seen this with every angle, so we want to make sure. One of the things we take a lot of pride in is proper descriptions, describing something down to a detail, make sure it's authentic, but yeah.
And you also come to shows like this, right? So, they're brought a whole bunch of stuff. We spend a bit of time with RR, saying, hey, what are you going to bring this year? So, sure, quick follow-up, and then this gentleman here.
Since you do this, would you consider opening a satellite office here in the valley?
Yes. Will you work there? I mean, we need somebody to man it for us. But sure, it's one of those things where we just jump on planes as much. We wouldn't mind having brick and mortar everywhere, but it's in today's world, it's so easy to communicate via Zoom, and then we'll come pick stuff up. Like I went and picked this when I found out about this one. Before I told him, I had to fly across the country to get it.
I'm amazed how often now you live up in New England essentially, and I'm amazed how often he's in New Jersey visiting. Because right, we have Bell Labs guys and stuff like that. So all the time, like, hey, I'm in Jersey.
Right.
I'm in Manhattan.
We're just an auction house. We don't own the items, so we're representing them for people, right, and families. And we help people. I mean, they're either in debt, died, they're getting divorced. I mean, they need to get these things into the hands of people that will take care of them and curate them. So it's a relationship. We're just people's agent. So it's important to us to have a relationship with the people we work with.
You had a question?
Yeah, just does anyone ever bring in their own expert to evaluate the item before they buy it?
Yeah. Many times people will vet him. They'll double check his work. They'll double, one of the things that is proper when an auction house makes claims is go ahead. How do you come up with this? Where did this come from? In our world, provenance is everything. Chain of custody. Where did it come from? And then it's authenticity. But we like to show things. We like to have our work scrutinized because we're going to be on the hook for it. If we make a mistake, we want to properly vet it, and that in our reputation's everything. And it's we want to make sure everything we put out there has been scrutinized. Because I don't want to listen to Corey. I mean, Corey, will tell me right? But you have to trust him, and you have to take an unbiased opinion. Because Corey will tell you, Bobby, this has been modified. This isn't what your client thinks it is, or whatever.
Right.
So
I talk to a lot of insurance companies. A lot of times people want to insure their artifacts, right? And I talk to a lot of them. I won't give them values. That has to be established by auction, things like that, or comps. But is this really that? So we can do a comp. And yeah, my work's checked. My work's checked all the time. I have, experts will share between each other things that we don't necessarily make public, and that's on purpose, right? Think about it. There's Gerber files, instructions on how to create PC boards out there for the Apple I. Okay? And I know all the mistakes on those Gerbers, and I know all the apparent mistakes on the Apple I that are, not public. And, there's a list of things to look for, and that the people who know those is about 5 people, WAS included. So we used to have lots of email threads going around about, what stuff not to talk about and what stuff, only to share between the experts, right? So it is something we worry about. And I do get, questions asked, and if it's a proper expert, I will send additional information because we know that it's confidential, right? If Lloyd's of London comes to me and says, well, I need some additional information to make sure that this artifact was real, I will send them pictures and documents and measurements that are not public. That's key to understand. Simple as that. Because if some things get out there, they'll try to replicate. Now, it's really hard to replicate something made in 1976 now because the knowledge is lost. It's all done by machines now. And B, because of environmental laws, you can't do it, even in China, right? They don't have the materials. So, any other questions? Okay, we got 2 more coming.
Oh, so what is your favorite thing that you've auctioned off?
Wow, great question.
Okay, my favorite thing we've ever auctioned off, Professor Einstein had his 67th birthday in New York City, and he was followed around by paparazzi, right? And he's a big celebrity, and there were several photographers chasing him around on his birthday, and one of the photographers, not the guy that took the picture, says, "Professor Einstein, give us a smile for your birthday." And he turns and goes, and they get the photo, right? But if you look at and it runs in the UPI, it goes around the world the next day. But if you see the original photo, he's in the back seat of a car with 2 other people, an elderly couple that they had gone out to dinner with, and Einstein himself writes to the photographer and asks him, "Listen, I love that photo, but can you crop out my friends and just send me this photo with my tongue sticking out?" And so the photographer makes 10 silver gelatin prints and sends them to Einstein. So he gives them to his friends, and one of them was an ABC radio host that I think it was Eric K. Smith, is that right? Or one of those guys that used to have an evening Sunday radio show, and he was a fan. And this is during the McCarthy era. And Einstein sends them this photo, and on it is an inscription in German. And anyway, the guy dies, and a estate happens, and people know. So somebody bought it for like $8,000, sent it right up to us. But we don't know what the inscription says, so we hire someone to transcribe it, and it says, "This gesture is aimed at all humanity. Albert Einstein, 1951." And so and then we ended up selling it for $125,000, just because we got it transcribed, and it was a museum quality, oversized photo. But it showed me that Einstein understood public relations, and he understood the power of celebrity, that he could take that and that's the one you see is the one he cropped. So I think that's my favorite one because of the detective work and the fun of it, and it's Albert Einstein, One other quick one about Einstein. We got some letters from him, and he was arguing with a colleague, and there were all these German physicists that came to America, so it was in German again. But basically, this guy says, "Einstein, you don't know what you're talking about." And Einstein wrote him back and says, "Listen, all you have to do is use E equals mc squared. Anybody knows that, Albert Einstein." And so Albert Einstein wrote, it was the theory of relativity. He didn't use the mathematical equation, or you put it on the chalkboard. So there's very few examples of that, and we had it in a letter, and we sold that for $1.3 million. So we're also big Einstein people. So those are some of my favorites.
Now, everyone who went to Princeton is going to go home and look what they have and see if they've got anything from Professor Einstein, right?
Well, somebody did find a bunch of his pipes that he smoked because his his daughter-in-law lived at the same house all the way into the 80s where he lived, and then when she went, she found a bunch of pipes, and we sold those for an enormous amount of money too. So
well, that also gets into one thing I just want to comment, and then the one last question, because we're going to run out of time here. When we talk about provenance is everything, that's an example. Well, how do you know? How do you know that it came from someone who lived in the house, right? Like, how do you know these lucky strikes went into space? Well, we've got affidavits and proof and
from the
chain of custody.
astronauts, yeah.
Yeah, and that's important, right? So when people buy an artifact, the documentation is super, super important to know where it came from, and that's how we know, that's the detective work. That's the stuff that, why the auction house doing the detective work, deserves what they get to help sell it, right? People ask, why? Well, they do a lot of work. It's not just putting it on a website.
Right. The story and the emotional connection to it is what drives the price, as well as the importance of it. So.
Yep. So one last question. Anyone have any last question? Okay. Well, this could be interesting.
Uh-oh.
So I'm just going to say, so Liza has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. I had the first Apple I in my basement for a long time, and History's Lost and found out about it, and they contacted me, and they contacted Woz, and they came to my house and did a session which got broadcast. It's section 40, it's History's Lost and Found number 47. It's got Woz interviewed at my house and me, and so this is provenance. I had a copy of that little short that History's Lost and Found had made. It was broadcast. I don't have a copy of it. History's Lost and Found doesn't have a copy of it. This is a request. If anybody can find this 5 to 10 minute short, we need a copy of it.
All right. Anybody out there on YouTube has History Lost and Found, because we've lost some history. It's episode 47. I'm sure somebody out there has taped it. Please contact our auction and we'll get that for you, Liza, you detective.
So actually, this is actually pretty good, just to end on this. So the Apple I that is being shown, the prototype. So if you look at the sequence of Apple I's, there was the wire wrap version, which was Woz's personal computer. It was not, Apple didn't exist then. That's what prompted them to create Apple, right? And that belongs to Woz, he has it. There's this one, which was in the photographs that Paul Terrell took of a running Apple I, probably the machine that was shown off after the wire wrap at Homebrew Computer Club. Then the next board was the Glenn Delamore board, which is the one where they were trying to figure out how to make it work. They had some memory problems. We know why they had memory problems. It had to do with a misprint in a Signetics doc book. So they were playing around to figure out which brand memory would work in the machine reliably. So they had made some modifications to figure out like which ones. So that's that board, and then is Liza's board. So Liza's board was given to the Loop Center, sorry. I do that all the time. The Loop Center, it was given to the Loop Center by Woz. So it is the first production board that was brought into the wild. So those are the boards. The wire wrap in Woz, this particular one, Glenn's board, and Liza's board. And Glenn's board was never really sold to the public. It wound up in the wild later on. So pretty cool, right? And you can actually see Liza's board next to the prototype out in the floor. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks. You, everybody. Thank you.